Hello, traders. Welcome back. You're tuned into another episode of Market on Mic. Or as you all know, we're actually here to break down the trading world in a way that actually makes a whole lot of sense to you. If you've been listening to us from the very first episode or you've been following the past episode, you actually know that we are here to make trading and investing very, very easy for you to understand with the sole purpose of you making money. So we're here to give you the real insight about trading, not just trading, but also investing in different financial instruments across the global financial market, and not just the hype. Right? And I'm not here alone as your host. I have my amazing co-host with me, Natasha. Welcome to another episode of podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Market on Mic. And today we are actually going to be tackling a big one. But before we actually get into it, just like what Daniel said, it is a new quarter, and I'm sure that we all have our goals, our financial goals for this particular quarter. So I'm sure we have our journals already. We've written them down when we're looking to take advantage of some exciting opportunities that would be coming our way this very quarter. And that is why, just like we said in our last episode, that in this new quarter, we're going to be looking more on strategy. So trust me, it is going to be a very, very educative and also insightful episode, so that moving forward, we're able to make much more profitable trades. Like I said, we're tackling a very big one today, and we could do a round of applause, but we're going to be talking about the supply and demand trading. So definitely, if you're not new to trading, I'm sure you've heard about this a whole lot of times, and it is one of the most talked about strategies out there. But here's the question: is it really the holy grail like traders think it is?
When you come into trade, that's the first thing you get to learn: support and resistance, or supply and demand. And if you think it's the holy grail, you're actually about to find out.
Exactly. And we're asking questions like, can it alone make you profitable, or is there more to the story? So you aren't trading alone. One thing every trader wants to know, or one thing every trader should know, is that as a trader, you want to know who you're trading with. You might not know this. We're actually trading against huge financial institutions that actually move the market with millions of dollars.
Yeah, those are the big guys there.
They are the ones making an impact, determining where price is actually headed. And then there is us, or there is you and your $100 account, and you're trying to make a quick $20 for lunch, placing a trade, closing your eyes in hopes that everything will run well. You might even be praying to the market gods for help, determining on what you believe in. Without being knowledgeable, you are actually at risk of having your entire account being wiped out, guys. So now you already know who you're trading with. So how do we take advantage of the millions and even billions of dollars that we actually do have on the market?
All right. Thank you very much for that, Natasha. And if you've ever placed a trade, probably you are an experienced trader, or you've been trading for a while and you've been making use of supply and demand for your trading. If you've ever placed a trade at supply or demand, probably you're new, you don't know what supply and demand is. Well, we'll come right into it. So probably you've been trading supply and demand zones, and at the point when you got into your trade at supply, you see the market blow right through them. You're actually not alone on that. It happened to so many of us. So many traders fall into this common trap when using the supply and the demand zone, and we'll be breaking it all down for you in this episode.
That's right, guys. So by the end of this episode, you would know exactly what is fact, what is fiction, and how to actually use supply and demand zones the right way. So Daniel, let's get into it.
Okay, I'm actually quite excited about that. So before we get into it, because we're going to be talking about the myths, the misconceptions about supply and demand, and before we go into that, let's first understand what supply and demand zones actually are and how they work, especially for our new traders out there, those that are looking to come into the market space and start trading on the market. Natasha.
Okay, so at its core, when you look at a supply zone, it is actually an area where selling pressure is expected to be strong. So I'm sure probably if you're still wondering, what are these people actually talking about? I know that one thing that we are all kind of familiar with is your resistance and support. zones in the market. So where you have selling pressure, that is, we know that when the price gets to a resistance and does not break that resistance, we're actually going to be seeing a further sell. So you can actually say that is actually your supply zone, right?
Yeah,
so
that's
where
correct, sure.
your selling pressure is expected to be strong, causing price to drop. And a demand zone is where your buying pressure is strong enough to push price up. That is, when your price gets to your support and does not break that support, we're definitely going to see a
pushback.
Yes, a push price to the upside. Simple,
that's
right?
Very true. Yeah, that's very, very correct. And I think it's quite easy to understand. So the whole market is about supply and demand. And if you've probably read economics before, you will know that market or commodities or assets are actually moved by supply and the demand of those particular assets. And it happens almost the same way in this particular space. But this is where traders go wrong. They actually think that all of the zones are actually magic reversal points. Probably you go into a trade on the market, you buy from a demand, which you ideally expect. Maybe someone somewhere told you, just buy at demand and you make money. And you buy at demand and the market trades right through it. And you're like, what happened? So they're actually not magic reversal point. And the market doesn't really work that way. So they are, like Natasha previously said, that you're trading with institutional guys, the big players, the banks. So they don't just place trades at this level and hope for the best. So it's all different.
Exactly. They care about liquidity. There's one thing these major players actually care about is liquidity. And this is where the most stop losses are stacked. And that is why it's like, so most of the time, price comes down to your stop loss, hit it, and then goes into your direction straight to your
wow.
And you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I was actually talking to a fellow trader today, and he said this exact same thing. He said, Natasha, this market is manipulated. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he was like, they said, or they taught us that when you get to your support, you buy. But then I see price actually breaking the support. And I could not just help but laugh, because at the end of the day, markets don't work that way. So we see that where the most stop losses are stacked and where they can place huge orders without moving the market too much. That's why zones sometimes break before working.
Yeah, and that example you gave is a very, very common one. It happens to mostly new traders. You go into a trade, they told you to set your stop loss maybe a few price away from your entry position, and you just wait for the market to go in your direction, and you see the market trade against you, take out or hit your stop loss, and then reverses, and you're like, what happened? These are some of the things that you get more direction and clarity on. Now let's go into the myths or misconceptions that traders believe about supply and demand. Right, so let's look at the first one. The first one is supply and demand zones always hold.
Okay, so just like what Daya said, this is actually one of the biggest misunderstandings. Just because you have marked the supply or demand zone doesn't mean price would respect it. Yeah. Don't forget, market is moved based on liquidity and momentum, not just drawn box on the chart.
Right, it's funny how you starting out and you learn technicals, you learn support and demand or supply and demand, and then you just draw the box here, draw this, and you draw your box and price comes into your box and you take a trade and price breaks through your box and you're like, what happened? So it's not just a magical box or anything. You must have seen probably your perfect demand zone or your perfect supply zone broken through, right? Stopping you out and then reversing back in your direction. So these are actually the market makers or the liquidity or those big institutions in play, right? They're not just always gonna hold. That's one of the first misconception or myth.
Yeah.
So let's look at another one. So the second one is, the bigger the zones, the stronger the trades. How does that play out?
See, a lot of traders think that the bigger the zone, just like what Daniel said, the better the trade. But what really matters is how the zone fits into the overall market structure.
Sure, market structure is actually very important. And probably you're looking at, okay, what is a zone? A zone is just basically capturing different price points, maybe $1, $2, those are like price levels, and you're drawing your box between $1 to $2. That is actually a zone, right? So that is what a zone actually means. It's not a magical level, there's just still price levels. So a demand zone, you must always tend to see how your zone aligns with the market structure, like Natasha rightly said.
And when you talk about market structure, you're talking about the trend of the market.
Yeah, the trend of the market.
And we have a very common saying that the trend is your friend.
Is your friend
till the end.
The love relationship.
Exactly. We already said it. This is actually, when it comes to strategies, this is your roadmap to success. It's a loved relationship. So you want to be able to trust whatever strategy that you're looking to have. So you want to understand that when you talk about structure, you're talking about trend.
So if you're trading supply and demand, always try to see how it aligns with the overall structure or trend of the market. So this is another misconception. So we have one more misconception.
Yes, and I think I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Is the market always reacts to this level? Another big mistake. This is another big mistake traders make is assuming that price would always react at a supply or demand zone. The reality, sometimes the market completely ignores this level and just keep moving.
Yeah, you just see the markets like nothing is there. They just trade pass through your supply or your demand level. So that's why you must always look at the bigger picture. If price is in a strong trend, the demand zone in a downtrend is far more likely to break than hold, right? So like you said, demand zone is where you buy from. So if the overall structure of the market is to the upside, it is much more preferable to trade from a demand zone rather than a supply zone is most likely to break because the overall structure is to the upside, right? So try to align the market structure and your supply and demand zones together, and you get better trading opportunities that way.
All right, so you might actually now be wondering, with all these things that you probably have heard, so how do I actually use supply and demand correctly? Now, these are three things that we've been able to work on, and here are three things that actually matters. Number one, just like we said, you want to follow your trend.
Yeah, follow the trend.
The market structure. So zone works best when they align with the overall market trend. A demand zone in an uptrend is far more likely to hold than one in a downtrend.
Exactly. And funny thing is, the market is always moved by supply and demand. So whether the market is trending to the downside or the market is trending to the upside, you always get to find your supply and demand. So know which one is much more important based on the market structure, which actually helps you to make better trading decisions, right?
And then you also want to use institutional levels, just like we pinpoint at the beginning of this particular episode, right? You're trading with the big guys.
Yeah.
You're trading, it is the more money you have, the more you're able to move the market. And when we said the more money, we're not talking about $1,000 or so. I mean, we have institutions trading with millions, in fact, billions of dollars, right? So you want to be able to trade within this institutional level. So instead of just drawing random zones, look at round numbers. So let's say, for instance, you're actually trading Euro USD. You want to be able to use numbers like 1.1000. Remember, they are whole numbers, or they actually round numbers because institutions actually love these levels.
Yeah, they actually do love these levels, and it's less stress because they can easily tell or say, okay, I want to buy at 1 point when price gets to 1.2. All those other price. I mean, who remembers 1.2589? That is so much. So you want to actually look at the round numbers because it is very, very easy to know, and institutional guys look out for that.
Yes. And then you also want to trade with risk management.
Risk management, we've said this over and over and over and over and over. Very, very important.
Yes. So you never want to assume that a zone will hold. You just always use stop losses and manage your risk properly. No level is actually 100% guaranteed.
Yeah, no level is 100% guaranteed. Even if it's a supply or demand level on the monthly time, it is not still 100% guaranteed. So your risk management is actually very important. So that is actually some of the things you need to consider to make your supply and demand, or actually use your supply and demand correctly. Yeah.
And let's not forget that the goal is not to predict the market 100%.
Yeah.
So you want to always have your risk management in place. Don't just assume that, okay, because this is a supply level or a demand level, then it is just going to automatically work out. Let's not forget that there is things we need to pay attention to that would actually help us make better decisions.
Right. So if you're actually going to look at what's the key takeaway, all right, from all of this, the first thing that you want to look at is the supply and demand is actually a tool. It is not a magic system.
Obviously.
Right. It's actually a tool you actually want to use to make you want to make predictions on where the market is actually going to be headed, right? Or you want to get a sentiment of where the market's heading to based on what you're seeing. So traders who succeed are the ones who understand trends, institutional levels, and actually proper risk management, which cannot be overemphasized.
Right. So if you've been marking zones and wondering why they fail, now you actually know. So
Right,
it is
you know
time to refine your approach and think like a professional trader.
Yeah, you need to start thinking like a professional trader, because if you've been following the episodes from the very beginning, now is actually the time to pay much more attention, because we're taking you from novice to a point of professionalism. So you want to stay with us every single time. So we've shown you one of the strongest and a very important tool in trading or in analyzing the market, which is the supply and demand. We've shown you how not to use them and actually the right way to make use of them. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you actually learned a whole lot of things. You got great value from today's episode. Thank you for tuning into Market on Mic. And it's actually NFP week, guys. All right, so it's NFP weeks. As a trader, you actually want to pay attention to these fundamentals. So NFP is actually called non-farm payroll. If you're a new trader, if you don't know what that is, you can actually go to your browser, type in Forex Factory or type in NFP or non-farm payroll, and you actually get more information. So we're going to be having NFP this week on the Friday, and it's actually going to be an exciting one. And we also have a very important speech today, which is Wednesday, right, by Donald Trump, and you actually want to pay attention. So if you are a trader, or probably you trade your supply and demand, and you wonder, why is price trading or breaking through my demand zone when I buy, or breaking through my supply zone when I sell? Probably you're not paying attention to the fundamentals, right? So you need to pay attention to fundamentals. So traders, you're able to follow through properly, right? So if you found this episode helpful, come on, I want you to share with another trader, or share it with someone willing or is willing to come into the trading world, so they actually get to follow through diligently.
Okay, everyone. So thank you for being on this particular episode. And do not forget, we want to hear from you. So you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Market on Mic, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button right here on Spotify, so that you'll be alerted every time we have a new episode. And don't forget, we said that this particular month we're going to be dealing with strategies, and you want to be updated on the right way to use every strategy that you actually come across.
All right, so we'll see you in the next one. Until then, trade smart, stay disciplined, keep learning, and see you in the market. Bye.